What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode here at the stable featuring the ScrapStang. In the last video, we got started on the wiring for the ScrapStang. We were able to mount the fuse box as well as route all the wires where they need to go. As you can see, we have our radio wires secured to where the radio is supposed to be, as well as our ignition wires where the ignition switch is supposed to be, so on and so forth. Everything is in its corresponding location. Everything except for the engine, because, well, there's no engine. For those of you that are new here, this is a 5-liter 302 out of a Mercury Mountaineer, and this is what's going to be in the ScrapStang. We just rebuilt this 302, or should I say overhauled. We replaced the main and rod bearings as well as checked the clearances, and we also installed head studs. If you guys want to check out those videos, they are on the channel. Anyway, before we can throw this engine into the Mustang, whoa, we need an oil pan. We are getting closer and closer to getting this thing started, so let's get to it. First step, we gotta clean up this nasty oil pan. I'm gonna soak it with some degreaser. There is so much RTV on this. And look, this was just loose on the inside of the tank. So if this were to fall off and go into your pickup tube, now you're starving the engine. I'm all for the use of RTV, but damn, not that much. Also using a plastic razor blade so I don't scratch the surfaces. Now that it's soaked for a bit, we're gonna dump it out on the drain pan we have down here and get it all over our feet. Spray it again, agitate it with the sponge. My wife's gonna be pissed when she sees the sponge. For anyone that might be doing something similar, it's important not only to clean the inside of the oil pan, but the outside as well. Because if it's all covered in oil, if you get an oil leak, you'll look at it and say, well, that was already there. But if it's nice and clean and you see oil, then you know it's a new oil leak. Look at that, we could actually see the Ford emblem now. This thing is actually pretty beat up. You can see all the raw metal spots and all the scratches and dings it has. I'm not going to paint it now because I don't have enough primer nor paint to do that. And for those of you that are already commenting, oh my God, it's gonna rust. Look at this car. This car identifies as rust. All right, the oil pan is clean, and I know it might not look as clean, but clean fingers. Our valve covers also received the same treatment as the oil pan. They are nice and clean as I can get them, obviously. I didn't really want to run these valve covers. They are a bit ugly, but the wallet says we have to. So another thing that definitely needed attention was the timing cover. As you can see, it's all gunky and nasty. Also, when I separated the water pump from the timing cover, look at all the stuff that fell out of it. We're also going to need new hardware because you can see that this one on the bottom has started wearing away at the threads, probably with the corrosion. And this gasket is on there. We are probably going to buy another water pump because that one was crusty. I was thinking about going electric water pump as well, but those units are like 300 bucks, so probably just stick with the regular mechanical one. Also, after cleaning all these engine parts, I realized I need myself a good parts washer. One of those with the little cabinet, a little sink. Look at all this crud. Nasty, nasty. Look at all the stuff that's about to fall out. Alright, so I've run into a little bit of an issue. In order to bolt the oil pan onto the engine, I have to obviously bolt on the timing cover, but in order to bolt on the timing cover, I need to bolt on the water pump, which needs new hardware because, well, they're all rusty and crusty. But look at all the different sizes for the hardware there is. Like, whoever at Ford engineered this, you can go suck a butt. No one in town carries a kit for the complete bolt set, so we're going to have to individually match them up at the hardware store, which is not very fun because there is so many of them and so many different sizes. And once I remove them from here, they're gonna, look at this, it doesn't even come out because it's so crusty. Look at all these different sizes. How did they look at this and say, yeah, let's do it? At least at the very minimum, they are the same thread pitch. I'm surprised Ford didn't say, hey, why don't we throw some metric in there as well? All right, a trip to the hardware store, and $24 later, we now have all of the bolts that we need. I would have liked to get more of these black ones with the flange head, but they didn't have any this length. I don't really like to use two different colors, but that's all we can do. We also got some thick and thin washers just in case we need to play around with the length. Now is also a good time to install our seal. I'm gonna put a light coat of RTV on the outside of this. And for those of you wondering, this is not a seal driver. It is the back of a speaker, but it fits perfectly, so. That looks like it is sitting all the way. Cool beans. We also got ourselves a new water pump because the old one, well, you can see. After spending time and money rebuilding this engine, I don't think I want to run this pump. Here's a side-to-side comparison. You guys tell me down in the comments which one you would prefer running. So now we have the annoying task of matching up all of the bolts to where they need to go. I think I've got them all where they need to go, but if not, either way, we still have to remove all of these and then redo it on the engine. Before we throw the water pump on, we have to throw a thin layer of RTV on this gasket on both sides. A lot of people like to throw these on dry, but since this timing cover is in pretty rough shape and I know the surface is not perfectly smooth, this will make up for the imperfections. I'm gonna use these two bolts to guide me in. Throw a third one. In the location where the timing cover goes bolted on, there are two dowel pins. Well, there's one missing here, but the one on this side is in pretty rough condition. So, me being the hoarder that I am, I have two dowel pins that are the right size. Cool beans, two new dowel pins, good to go. Now we repeat the RTV for the timing cover gasket. All right, fully coated. The dowel pins as well as the RTV will help keep this gasket in place. Okay, it probably would have been easier to mount the gasket to the timing cover first, but it's too late now. All right, we're looking a little more complete now. Water pump and timing cover are now installed. They're not torqued to spec just yet. I'm gonna wait till I bolt the oil pan, but the gold bolts were a little bit too long, so I doubled up on a spacer. I have one thick one and one regular one. I'll probably change those out later, but for now, they're staying on there. Time for the oil pan. Going to clean up the surface so it's not oily. Before we can install the oil pan, we have to install the oil pump, and this is the distributor drive gear. Forget how this goes sometimes. I almost forgot about the gasket. Was one of you going to tell me? 25 foot-pounds. Click, click. Pickup tube with the gasket this time. Alrighty folks, pickup tube, oil pump, and distributor drive gear or drive shaft is installed. I think we're ready to seal this bad boy up. Sometimes when you buy an oil pan kit, it comes with guides in order to properly seal and install the gasket, but since this one didn't come with it, I have my own guides that I used when I installed the intake in the last Mustang. I only have 3 of them, so it's gonna have to do. Before we throw on the oil pan, we have to put RTV in a couple locations. One being the main caps, or the timing cover caps right here in the corners. It's the little goop, as well as the block to timing cover mating surface, as well as the rear main cap corners, which my guide is getting in the way, but it's all right. All right, let's get this thing installed. In the last video that we did replacing a oil pan gasket or installing one, we put a bead of RTV all around it, but that was a different style gasket, so we aren't going to do that this time. Actually, I'm going to put some RTV on the corners but on the outside of the gasket, just in case. All right, now we can add these retainer plates, which I find pretty damn awesome because the early model 302s or small block Fords just had bolts, which you would think is okay, but with years of use and people constantly over tightening them, it kind of turns like valve cover situations where they get over tightened and then the area where it's over tightened gets dented, therefore making the surface not flat and making it not seal. Whereas with these retainer plates, it evenly distributes the pressure, or more evenly distributes the pressure, so that won't happen. And to tighten these down, I'm gonna use my new favorite tool. Not necessarily new, I'm pretty sure this has been in use since I was born, but it's this guy. Just barely getting them tight. This is not torquing them to spec. Just getting them seated. This thing is so fun to use. Now we're gonna torque them down to 10 foot-pounds. So I tightened all these small ones to 10 foot-pounds. We're gonna do another round of 13 foot-pounds. These larger ones by the main caps were 12 foot-pounds, and we're gonna up those to 18 foot-pounds. All right, ladies and gents, the oil pan is now installed and sealed and torqued to spec. But if you guys remember, we did not torque the timing cover nor the water pump to spec, because I like to do the oil pan first, because that way these two bolts can pull the timing cover down and into its proper place, and then we go in and tighten all these bolts. And now we can torque these down to 15 foot-pounds. I'm also just going to throw the valve covers on without a gasket, because during the first start we are going to prime the system, and when we prime it I want to make sure that all of the rockers are getting oil. You guys will see what I mean when we actually do it, but we are going to prime the system by spinning the distributor drive shaft that we installed earlier in order to prime the system to make sure everything is well oiled before we crank it. We also have one more goodie to install. You guys may have heard the name Robert Lugo on this channel before, but his lovely wife Diane bought us this distributor. More specifically, it's a Pertronix flamethrower electronic ignition distributor, which means we don't have to deal with the annoying point system that was used in the 60s. And for the few of you that might be thinking, oh, you youngins just don't know how to use them right or properly adjust them, well, my friend, that couldn't be further from the truth. This guy right here, I daily drove him for years with the point system, and it did nothing but leave me stranded in places. Yes, I could have another point system in my trunk, but who the hell wants to adjust points in 113-degree weather? So shout out to Diane for making sure we never have to deal with points again. I'm all for old school technology and old cars, but that is something that could be left in the past. Also, you guys may notice that we don't yet have an intake, but not to worry guys, because the ScrapStang community has our back. Thanks to the Catman, Justin Collins, and Michael Sanchez, because they have all pitched in for us to get a nice intake. Now that we've sealed up the engine, we can now actually drop it into the car and finish up the wiring portion. And I promise in the next video, we will get the names up of our newest Patreons. We just got a little bit sidetracked. And unfortunately, we are also out of time in order to keep these videos on schedule. So with that being said, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.